Are you looking to up your game when it comes to delivering your wedding films? Are you tired of sending out a YouTube or Dropbox link? Stand out from the competition by delivering your films in a way that will make your couple say wow. And you're going to be thanking us because we have put together a list of the best platforms to deliver your wedding films over at howtofilmweddings.com/delivery. That's right, we have a list of approved delivery services right at your fingertips at howtofilmweddings.com/delivery. Check out all of our approved delivery solutions and see what it could look like for you today. That's howtofilmweddings.com/delivery.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the How to Film Weddings podcast. My name is Nick Miller and today I am flying solo. John has the day off, but I am joined by Aaron Daniel. He is a Canadian wedding filmmaker, and we just had a really deep discussion getting in about his philosophy with editing and his storytelling and how it's completely different from so many things that I hear. And then, we dive into left brain and right brain, and we kind of just chatted. It was very different than conversations I normally have with people. And so I'm very excited to present this to you today. So yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into this week's episode of the How to Film Weddings podcast. Well, Aaron Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's good to have you here. How are you doing today?
Oh my goodness, Nick! It's so great to be here. This down season has been a fun time to try to get back into my personal life. Coming out of the busy wedding season. But yeah, how are things on your end?
No, man. I mean, can't complain. We just finished up Thanksgiving over here in America, and Christmas is coming up.
That's
and,
right.
We got our going to get together with more family and stuff. We, for how we do it, it's we're with my side of the family on Thanksgiving, and then we're with my wife's side of the family on Christmas, and then we kind of flip it the next year. So we got all that stuff going on. So things are going well here. We were in Cabo, my wife and I, filming a wedding a couple weeks ago, and we're going to the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee here in a week or two.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
oh my goodness. So. How is the weather right now? Wichita, correct?
Yeah. We had a record amount of snow the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So the last Saturday in November, we had like over 8 inches or something like that.
Holy
so it's good here. I tell people that we have the extremes of all of the seasons here in Kansas. So, but it's good here. So
the Midwest. I'd love to come visit sometime.
Yeah. Kansas is a flyover state, I think, for a reason. So, it's always
That's
flying
hilarious.
over, going somewhere better. But no, Kansas is great. So, for people that might not know who you are, why don't you just kind of give a quick rundown about you and your business and where you're located and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Aaron. I run Aaron Daniel Films, just after my first and middle name. I'm a Canadian wedding filmmaker, mostly servicing the greater Toronto area in Canada here. But I've also had the pleasure of working with couples across North America, across Canada. I was in Mexico a few times in the past few years, all the way to the Philippines. I was in Malaysia a few months ago, and next year I'm excited to be in Italy for work.
Oh yeah. We were in Italy in September, so it's nice there. I like it.
Oh my goodness, where? What was your favorite part?
Favorite part, man. That's tough. That's tough. We flew into Rome and we were there for a few days, and then the wedding was in the Tuscany area outside of Volterra, and so that's where we were for the wedding.
That sounds beautiful.
I really like the city of Volterra in like the wine country stuff. Like it was really cool. It's really cool. Where are you going?
Oh, I'd imagine. It's hard to describe. It's just, I think, maybe just northeast of Rome. Okay. Way the couple described it was very vineyard castle-y. So I have a feeling it'll be on par with what you got to capture too.
Yeah. Vineyard Castle. That's a genre of weddings that I think that we could get on board for, right?
Oh, I love it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So how's is the Toronto market like being there in Canada? I mean, obviously, you don't live in the United States, so things are. But from what you see, is it very similar to what you see from stuff here? Is it a little bit different? What's your
I love that question because I think about that often too. Most of the educators that I come across are, at least online, are typically American, and and I understand that you're coming from an American kind of economic background when you approach running a wedding film business. I do notice, at least from my interactions within the How to Film Weddings group, there's a well, for one, I think the financial budget for weddings might not be as healthy as the wedding industry in the States, and you probably get this often speaking with your international friends. But Canada, I think it's hard to really say because, like the States, there's such a vast amount of budgets out there and what couples are looking for. But I think it's hard to say. I think from my understanding, would you say in the States a good like average that a lot of newly dedicated videographers are finding themselves in is in the maybe $2,000 to $5,000 mark? Would you? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of depending on the city and the ambition of the the filmmaker and all that stuff, but I'm hearing more and more people in year 2 or 3 or 4 charging $3,000, $3,500, $5,000. I'm hearing more of those numbers for people where it took me 6 years to charge $5,500. People too are doing that here. So
yeah, exactly. I think I would attest to that as well up here in at least the Toronto area. I'm not sure what it's like outside of the GTA. I know Vancouver, Calgary, maybe Montreal would be along the similar lines. But again, it's such a vast range. You mentioned when you started, it took you 6 years to get to where, around 6 years to get to where people are getting at in 2 or 3 years, and I would say the same. When I first started in 2014, I mean, I shot my first wedding for free. And then this past year, I want to say, and I don't think this is a good indicator for what the average is, but my highest package this year was $25,000, and I think the lowest I was at was around 8 or 9. So that's where I'm at right now, and it took me, how long is it? 10 years, coming up on 10 years for me. And I know videographers with their ambition, they can get here within half that maybe.
That's also one of the cool things about being on the How to Film Wedding side in the education stuff. There's just so much more of this stuff available now, and when I started in 2012, 2013, there was some stuff, like I'm not saying there wasn't, but it just wasn't as easy to find, and it was especially on like the business side of things, and the relationships you build and all that sort of stuff. So I think that that's helpful, and it's frustrating to me in the sense that it took me so long, but it's great. It's great for the industry and great for so many other people that they have been able to, grow their businesses and charge more and all that stuff.
As the industry matures, we're only getting better at our jobs,
Yes. So. Yes, definitely. So, so you're in Toronto. You've been doing this about 10 years. Like you said, you were charging $25,000. You did that.
That's not common for me.
No big deal. No big deal.
That's not common for me. Just to put it out there. Yes.
So, the thing that I'm thinking about, charging, I would say at least here in the US, regularly anywhere above, 6,000 US. Like there's something special, I think, that's going on with a business. If you are regularly charging those amounts and, getting up into, the five figures and in the things that you're doing. And so
it's such a milestone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's huge. It's awesome. But as I'm sitting here, what would you attribute, your success in being able to, book those kind of weddings and charge that kind of, what kind of things do you think about, that you're like, hey, I was able to do this because, and maybe that's, it's, which step was it in the last 10 years that got you here, right? Like it's kind of hard to tell,
Yeah.
but, what would you say if you're kind of your gut, what would you say is the thing or the few things that have gotten you built up to this point?
That's such a fantastic question. Oh my goodness. I wish I could ask everyone that. I think most people would have either really similar things or really out there fringe things. Something like, I think the average would be like, oh, I got my marketing in order. I have my network in order.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say something similar along those lines where within 10 years, I just meet the types of people that I want to be working with and vibe with the most. And
Mm-hmm.
that attracts the types of couples and I guess budget that comes with what I'm aiming for. But then I also have the like fringe explanation of getting to where I am by saying, oh, I just listen to classical music all day long or something, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
Or the other things that I'm interested in, like other forms of music, fine art, painting. But the one step, I think, and maybe this is a cop-out answer, but really leaning into who you are as a person and utilizing that in the most authentic way in your ability to serve your couples. Yeah, maybe that's a cop-out answer, but
It is. I need you to give me another one. No,
another.
I'm just kidding.
Okay,
I'm just
good
kidding.
for you,
I'm
Nick.
just
No.
No, it's not a cop out answer, and I'll tell you. Like, I think that a problem that probably all business owners across the board, whether you're in the creative industry or not, or you're a wedding vendor or you're a coffee shop owner, like whatever,
Yes, yeah.
we have the problem, like social media can be a great thing, it can be a great tool. We can learn from it. We can, it can market our business. We can do that. But, it's like I get on there and I watch an Aaron Daniel film and then I try to do what you're doing. But the problem is I'm copying you and not doing a very good job of it. Right. And we fall into the trap as creatives, as business owners, of doing things because other people are doing them and thinking that we will have the same success that you have because now I'm doing the thing that you're doing. What was it? I watched the, I don't know if you know of him, Yogi Berra. He was a baseball player for the Yankees in like the 50s and 60s and stuff, 40s, 50s and 60s. And whenever he became a coach, there was this this player that wanted to have a batting stance like another one. And I'm probably going to mess it up, but his quote was something along the lines of like, you need to be able to emulate what they're doing before you copy what they're doing. And the idea was you need to be able to produce the same type of results that they are producing before you try to copy what they are doing. It's probably there's some nuance in there, or and I'm probably screwing up the quote, but the idea
I get
is
the sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that you are very right in saying we need to be true to ourselves, because whenever you find that thing that really gets you going and gets you excited and gets you very passionate about the things that you are doing, like you're going to be able to produce something more authentic and more real than by you watching my work and trying to copy me and trying to spin it that
Exactly.
way.
Yeah. I think I think we all need to know some sort of fundamental, some standard of what good work is. But then to put it into an analogy, once you can understand how to draw perspective in painting or drawing, that's when you can break the rules and create something like an out there Van Gogh painting, you know? So once you do have those fundamentals, I think that's when I think you should lean into why or why not you want to follow the fundamentals. And I remember, it's funny you bring up Yogi Berra, because I think we can take inspiration from any form of media as well. Sports, art. I was just listening to an art podcast, a fine art podcast, contemporary art podcast yesterday, and they were talking about the idea of finding your voice, finding your style, and what they mentioned was needing to know and taking a very intense approach to knowing the fundamentals of things. And once you reach that kind of limit of knowing, I know how to, again, draw in perspective or paint with the right color theory around the messaging that I'm trying to convey. Once you do have those fundamentals, again, becoming Van Gogh when you don't want to be Picasso, or was it the other way? Sorry, becoming Picasso when you don't want to be Van Gogh, instead of Van Gogh, I should say. So like really leaning into the things that you're interested in is a good way of implementing this into your work. And I touched on this a second ago with classical music, but also growing up in the Toronto area, working in the Toronto area, I was very heavily influenced by, we have Drake here, we have The Weeknd, we have Justin Bieber. So growing up, I think I was very influenced by those genres of music and really implementing it into the energy of how I enjoy films, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. I like that analogy of the Van Gogh and Picasso, because I'm not a big art buff guy, but I mean, it sounds kind of like, that Picasso was after Van Gogh and he was kind of studying, and he was like, I don't want to paint this kind of stuff. So I'm going to kind of I'm going to learn how to paint, but then I'm going to go do something totally different. Is the idea, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like we're never going to be I'm never going to be as good as Nick is as Nick is at being Nick, you know?
Right. Exactly.
I hope I didn't butcher that.
I think you said that right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's really good. And so you've been able to lean into who you are and the things that you are really excited about. And that shows in the work that you do. And, I think that people that, at least from my perspective, that seem very fulfilled in their businesses and the things that they're doing, they've found that thing that gets them excited to continue to working, right? Rather than doing it for the paycheck. And for some people, like, that is their motivation, right? It's like, to make a lot of money is exactly why I do all this. And there's no wrong answer in all of these things, right? But whatever it is for you out there listening that you're passionate about, that you can lean into, leaning into who you are is only going to help you be more fulfilled with that. So
exactly.
Whenever, is we're preparing for this and stuff, one of the things that you mentioned is I think you take a little bit of a different approach when it comes to how you edit and kind of your philosophy and kind of thinking about how it is that you want to edit your films or how you want to piece stuff together. And so I'd love to just open up that conversation whenever people hear, oh, he charges like what, you have a philosophy for editing, you have these, like you've made these decisions. And so not that, again, not saying that we should copy your philosophy, but you have put a lot of thought into how you want to piece stuff together and how you want to go about that. So can you just open that up and talk about what you're thinking about with editing and how it has, been more meaningful for you as a creative to produce that kind of work?
Piecing it together. That's such a good phrase, Nick, because as we'll talk about that's such an important part about my philosophy. So to put into one sentence and to, I guess, kind of bounce off of what we were just talking about with authenticity. Maybe this could be like an example or a form of encouragement around our listeners, around really leaning into who you are as an artist, as a wedding filmmaker. So my philosophy I would say comes from my personality. And to put it into one sentence, I like to turn the viewer into the protagonist. Instead of the viewer simply watching or observing the on-screen characters as protagonists, for example, the bride and groom, my aim is turning those screen characters into kind of guides to the story arc of a wedding day. The guides who help the viewer as a protagonist solve the problem and come to a conclusion. And to explain this a little more, maybe I'll take a step back and give you my kind of reasoning and how I came up with this kind of like hack to crafting our edits.
Okay.
So for me, I would, and I assume a lot of our listeners, I think good films are the ones that really engage us into the story, and the ones that really bring us into understanding what's going on. And from my experience, and again, I think my personality, there's a strong draw to the genre of mystery. So this is the part where I lean into my personality. When I was in primary school, I had the complete Sherlock Holmes book series. I thought I was going to go into private investigation. Then in high school, I slowly got into House MD, the show. And for those unfamiliar, it's about Dr. House who solves medical mysteries. And then ultimately, I went into university. Sorry.
Did you know this, that House is loosely based on Sherlock Holmes? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Like for real, his name is House instead of Holmes. Like, anyways, okay, continue.
That, yes.
Sorry, I totally interrupted your train of thought for that little tidbit that did not really add to
You must be a fan.
I've never watched it. I just know that's
well, I'm glad you're aware. And then, okay, yeah. So after watching House, I thought I was going to be some sort of doctor. I went into university, a major science research program. They only accepted 50 of us in my year. And even though I didn't go into that profession afterwards, I don't think I would want to experience learning in any other way, because we got to piece together different faculties of science, like the chemistry of a particular rocket fuel that brings us on a particular physics trajectory to the moon, and whether or not we want to bring a man to the moon or a human to the moon, judging by their psychological state, So while studying, there were a lot of pieces that I loved putting together, and for us as filmmakers, I think piecing together things is a big part of our day. As on the entrepreneurial side, we're thinking about the pieces of equipment that make the most sense to buy, balancing our finances, and understanding how many films we'd like to shoot within a year. So there are a ton of mysteries that we're trying to solve, just generally speaking, as business owners. And so I loved applying this kind of, what is this problem and how do I solve this mystery, to an actual wedding film edit. So the aim, for me at least, is to take the viewer into somewhat of an escape room, let's call it, giving them clues on how to get out, So instead of maybe what do they have in there, passwords or keys or hidden notes and stuff, what I would like to give these like trapped protagonists, which are the viewers, I like to give them visual clues. I like to give them clues on how to solve the wedding film story. And you might be wondering, what am I solving for? What's the problem? What's going on a wedding day that needs Sherlock Holmes to solve it?
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. But when I'm showing clues, I like to show things like I'm moving my hands a lot, so isolated hand gestures, specific body language. One form of body language I absolutely love looking for is a form called self-soothing. Maybe you're familiar with this, Nick, but when we're feeling anxious or kind of nervous, a lot of people with long hair might fix their hair to soothe them and make them feel like they're in control of what they can be in control of. That's called self-soothing. or touching your collarbone is another body language form of showing nervousness, you know. So those are kind of like bodily language visual cues for the viewer to kind of like understand what emotion is going on. And then we also have other forms of emotion through visuals, like high energy dance floors or static rooms, let's say, for example. I won't necessarily show full faces or bodies because that, I think, gives away too much. And again, Nick, I think you might be wondering, what am I giving away too much of? What are we solving for?
Mm-hmm. What are we solving for?
Let me get to that in a second. So another kind of like backstory before I get into where I'm going with this. I absolutely love the series The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor. The creator, Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan's the director of the series. He also did the show Midnight Mass, The Fall of the House of Usher. These are all, I would consider them, Netflix considers them horror shows, I guess. And those unfamiliar, I would consider it psychological thrillers, a lot like Shutter Island, if you're familiar with that movie by Martin Scorsese. Mm-hmm. So to get back to it, my favorite series of his, Mike Flanagan, is The Haunting of Bly Manor for its mix of romantic poeticism, psychological thrills, and the mystery. There's a mystery throughout the whole thing. The way I like to analyze this is kind of similar to the way I would approach the story arc of a wedding film timeline, like piecing things together. And what I think really engages viewers. So throughout The Haunting of Bly Manor, there's a main ghost antagonist with main characters and hidden ghosts throughout each episode. And at the end of the series, we kind of come to realize how each of the hidden ghosts, like literal hidden ghosts in the background that have no like say in the story, they're just there. And if you're not looking, you won't see them. In the same way that if you're not looking at different clips, different sections of wedding film footage, you might not get it. But at the end of it all, we realize how each hidden thing, each like clue, gives us the solution to the problem and how they relate to the problem. And so let me say it here. The problem in the story arc of an engaging wedding film, at least from my understanding and experience, is not knowing the couple. The aim for my edits is to have the viewer piece together who the couple is. And that might seem cliche, but let me get into that a little more. Taking the hidden ghosts and clues of a mystery story, in let's say the wedding decor or color design or energy levels of the crowd or the music that you choose. You're kind of piecing it together into that kind of aha moment of, I've got it. I know exactly who this couple is. Mm-hmm. And so I try to do this visually. I try to do this through the sound design, any musical choices. And I'd like to keep it as ghostly, ghostly might be a weird word, but as open-ended and implicit for the viewer to come to their own conclusions. If you share who the couple is right off the bat, and kind of like, at least from my perspective, if you open your film with a speech from the best man or the mother of the bride saying, so-and-so is such a heartwarming person, perfect for so-and-so's lovely empathy, you know, I think that says a little too much right off the bat. And for us who don't necessarily have a long attention span, it gets to the point where why watch the rest if I already know who this couple is? And that's kind of like my approach to things when we know, especially as wedding filmmakers, we've been to hundreds of wedding days, and we see similar things happen over and over again. But at least, again, from my perspective, I want to be the protagonist, kind of going back and forth with the editor, saying, "Oh, this means that," or "Oh, that that tree means this in this kind of way, or they chose that song, or they chose that color, or they chose those florals because it means this about them. Mm-hmm. It kind of gives the viewer a reason to watch. Yeah. And I could go on and on about this too, Nick. Does that kind of make sense? Maybe let me stop there and see what you think.
Yes, it's. I think the thing that I'm coming back to is it's all very intentional about how you are piecing stuff together and how you are thinking about things and how you want to show things off, and what it's almost like what you are showing is just as important as what you're not showing. And, just making these distinctions about the story that you're trying to tell, and I really like that philosophy. I think that's a really cool thing. I think it's definitely something that has probably taken you practice and lots of time and troubleshooting and, trying to figure out how to piece these things together. I'm sure that people, that are listening out there that are like, I have a tough time, getting the bride to stand where I want during prep, let alone, trying to, piece all of these things together and all of that. But I love the approach, and if you have a mind that works like yours obviously does to piece these things together, I think it sounds amazing, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think it would benefit a lot of editors, I think, to kind of approach like why are we editing a wedding film in the first place? Like, what are we trying to show? What message are we saying? Like, we can say there's a specific story arc from the preparations in the morning to the nighttime dancing, but from what I found, I think it's not always easy to show that through auditory ways, through the speech, or what the bride and groom are capable of conveying on camera, where we don't always have Hollywood actors on camera. So I think the reasoning behind using different forms of visual cues came about in my editing, because the couples, not every couple is attuned to sharing their story completely on camera through words or through their actions, because it's a once in a lifetime day, and I can get that it's nerve-wracking, so visual cues are what I like to put out there for my viewers to like put together themselves about who the couple is. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. It's the I think in popular culture, televisions and movies, they just assume that the audience that they're reaching is, a middle schooler or something like that, where their intelligence just isn't as developed. And so it's like, we're just going to tell you everything, and it sounds like you're more in the show, not tell kind of thing. It's like that seems to, as you're describing the philosophy, where it's like, I'm going to put this stuff on screen and then let you as the audience figure out what that means and how that applies, rather than, as you were saying, starting off with the mother of the bride's speech and sharing all these things about her. How can we say that she was these things that she said in her speech? How can we show those things without telling them word for word?
Exactly. And I think that poses a problem, like a major problem for editors, because it's not easy to visually show, like you're saying, and thank you, by the way. It's not easy to show who a person is. Truthfully, I don't think we can ever know anyone completely in just 5 or 10 minutes or however long your films are. Sure. But it's such a hard, a deep responsibility to take an abstraction from a wedding day onto a 5-minute film. We're taking the terrain and trying to map it on a little piece of paper. And I absolutely love understanding my couples through their emotions. I think maybe, would you want to touch on that maybe, Nick?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I think when we take an abstraction from, again, to bring up this analogy, from a terrain, like what's that phrase? The map is not the territory. When we're making a map of a wedding film from the territory of a wedding day or a couple's personality, we can only show so much. And that's where the deep responsibility comes in as editors, trying to really imbue who they are as couples into their wedding film, at least from my approach to things. And for me, I'd say emotions are the best way to show who a couple is. Not so much whether or not they look like a model, or what dress or suit they have, or even the venue that they're in, I think the emotions of a person is such a gateway to knowing who they are on a deeper level. And again, that's the problem that we're trying to solve for. When the viewer is watching, emotions mean so many different things, whereas a pair of Hermes shoes can only say so much, as sacrilegious as it is to say that. But yeah, I think emotions are the best indicator of who we are as people. And I could say something like, I like hip hop music at weddings, but that doesn't have as much meaning as saying something like, I'm someone who experiences nervousness or introversion and then coming up to feeling extroversion on the dance floor with the person I just married. Yeah. I think that has much more impact.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, like, how you describe that. And, it's like being nervous on your wedding day is very common, right? And then if it's most people are like, well, I don't want to show necessarily, it could be gold, right? But they're like, necessarily, like, I don't want to show him like just continuing to fidget or continuing to play with his hair or I don't want to show that because it's not
quote unquote nice
pretty,
looking.
Right. It doesn't quote. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look put together. It doesn't. But whenever you contrast that, where you have this nervousness of seeing, their partner for the first time, or you have that nervous energy, and then you can contrast that with after they see their partner, and you're like, okay. Now, like that nervousness, like you can feel that as a viewer, and then whenever you pair that with words that might be said, or the music that you're using and the swells, and just like there's so many different things that you can do to compare and contrast those emotions that I'm assuming that most people aren't thinking in those terms. That's
a really good way to put that. Yeah, maybe not. I would hope that maybe we can explore that and explain that, or take that into consideration more often. Yeah, the fidgetiness, the like. I think the TikToks and the Instagram reels that do really well are the ones that show that the quivering lip. I think it's called these days. When they're watching their bride walk down the aisle for the first time that day. Yeah. So
one thing also that, back to your Van Gogh and Picasso, analogy a little bit. Here you were talking about a genre of film and television that you really like would be a psychological thriller, from all those things that you listed. And psychological thriller and wedding, that's a hard marriage to put marriage pun.
That's funny.
Those are two genres that if you sit and think about it, you're like, these don't go together, right? But you have watched someone that does something a certain way, and then you're like, I like this. Now how can I Picasso it and take some elements and make it my own thing, on it, to a genre that psychological thriller doesn't necessarily fit in, but you're finding elements and finding things, being inspired by the world and the things that you're into. I didn't really have a question there. That was just kind of a statement as you were talking about these shows and things that you were very interested in. So
no, I love it. I think Picasso would vouch for that. He would co-sign what you just said.
I would hope so. I would hope so. So, anyway, I like hearing that, Floss. It's definitely one, at least how you've described it. I'm sure there are other people that are doing stuff that's similar or something, there's nothing new, in our world, but I haven't talked to someone that is able to articulate and walk through those things. I think, as people have asked me how, Nick, how do you know when to add this sound design, or how do you know when to do these things, or how do you know when to cut here? And I'm like, it's a feeling that I have. Like it's hard sometimes to articulate the things that are going on inside of you. Like I can't explain to you why I think that we need to add in some drum beats in this section, but not in this section. I'm just here and I'm in it and I'm feeling it and it needs to happen. And I know that I'm sure there's a lot of that with you, but you have been able to kind of talk through and process out loud a way that it might be confusing for some, but it does make sense with how you are putting that together. So that was really cool.
Oh, thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. I love how you just touched on being able to verbalize the way we feel things, because that's a very, very left brain versus right brain attitude or understanding of how we behave in the world. And that's a topic I'm very interested in at the moment. And I think it would benefit a lot of filmmakers too, to kind of like understand the differences between our left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. Is that something?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you kind of, you can open up that conversation, share what you know, and you kind of start with left brain is maybe typically this, right brain is kind of this, and just kind of for people that might not know, what do you have to say about it?
Yeah, so I've been on a binge for the past over a year, looking into the neuroscience of the brain, basically. And there's this one author that I'm really into. His name is Dr. Ian McGilchrist. Maybe some of our listeners are familiar with him. But he's a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and he just came out with a new book series called The Matter with Things. But his one book, actually I have it here. His one book, The Master and His Emissary. It's a very thick read, and it's a short quick read for all of you that are just listening on podcast. It's not like 6 inches thick at all, and I'm probably sure it's like 6-point font. At most 6-point font. Yeah. It's a dense read. I was going through it. The first few chapters again over the past maybe month or two, and every time I read it, there's something I take away from it. But basically, it's a book on, and his work is on the differences and the amalgamation of the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. Okay. So, I think as wedding filmmakers, this is really cool. So the left hemisphere, at least in popular science, we attribute it to the analytical mind, where the right hemisphere is the creative side. Okay. And to an extent, it seems like the literature agrees with the majority of that, at least sentiment of things. But to be a little more precise with the description of it, you would assume, or you can understand the left hemisphere more so in a sense of sequences in time, sequences in specific moments in time. So it takes, it takes. What's a good example? It'll see. I'm in the forest right now. It'll see the trees. It'll see a specific oak tree in the middle of a forest of birch trees, for example. It'll point out specific things, whereas the right hemisphere will see the whole forest as an ecosystem of life. So it sees the right hemisphere traditionally the creative side of our brain sees the bigger picture and how they all interconnect, and it'll see a person. And to bring this into wedding filmmaker terms, and from my interpretation of the book, when we see a scene, when we see a wedding ceremony, when we see a groom prep, bride prep, we'll see the whole room. We take it all in. It's going into our right brain. We're seeing what's going on and saying, oh, this is happening. And then it's our left brain that takes the action and says, oh, I need this specific angle because this light looks best here. And so that's when we're in our specific angle mindset of things, we're in our left hemisphere looking for that technical composure, technical lighting. And this is the part where I think would most benefit how we approach things. When we're in that left brain specific angle, looking for that specific angle, it would benefit us to put on our right hemisphere hat and think, how is this specific shot going to fit into the bigger timeline? How is this scene going to fit in with everything else? And if we can go back and forth between thinking about that, it becomes easier in the edit overall. Piecing everything together, knowing, and to put into colloquial terms, shooting for the edit.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
mm-hmm. Man,
and I thought that was really interesting to think about. Maybe Nick, let me share this one thing.
Yes, please do.
You have kids. When your wife or anyone listening, I think when we hold our children, we tend to hold them on the left side of our body. This, at least in the book, we can understand this as our left eye, which is connected to our right hemisphere. So our left side of our body is connected to our right hemisphere. Our right side of our body is connected to our left. We hold our babies on the left side of our chest because we're using our left eye to see them more clearly, which is our right hemisphere. And so when we're taking in and observing our children or whatever it is that we're holding, we'll tend to keep it on the left side for our right brain to take in as much information, as much of a whole image as we can, versus the other side where we're just looking for specific things. And when we're looking for specific things, we're not open enough to see what may or may not be good for what's happening for our child, you know. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, it, you know, I don't know how our brain works and how we do, you know, these things and how it all works together. But I like how you did put that together, you know, with at least at this guy's research, you know, how one half is very micro.
Yes,
and
exactly.
The other is very macro. You know,
mm-hmm.
like to talk about The Office reference, whenever Jim and Michael were both managers, Jim was the day-to-day, which would be the left, and Michael was the big picture, would be the right. So,
so good.
That's
and we know how successful it was.
Yeah. Yeah, we do know how successful that was there. But that's so cool. And I'm just sitting here thinking about, you know, you said, you know, typically you hold a child on the left side, and I'm going back and I'm thinking, and I think,
like, when you're shooting, which eye do you use?
I think that's right. That's what I would do. You know, I mean, I would, whenever I had a camera with a viewfinder, I would look at it with my left eye, you know, in the viewfinder typically.
Interesting.
Would I use the right eye?
I don't even know.
I
would use my right eye just because the way the camera is made, it makes the most sense, at least. Maybe it's a left-handed, right-handed question.
I don't know. Yeah, it could be a left-handed, right-handed kind of thing. I'm right-handed. I don't know what you are.
I am as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
maybe we're just you know. I have a problem with this too. You know, you're like asking these questions about holding your children in the camera and stuff, and I think that I'm kind of not very self-aware with myself. Whenever I think, I'm like, well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even being like in the moment, Nick,
mm-hmm.
not being self-aware of what you're doing. That's a very left hemisphere behavior. where you're just in it. Actually, my intuition is saying it's the left hemisphere that's very like not aware of where you are, because it's a right hemisphere thing to be like, oh, I'm in the middle of a ceremony, I probably shouldn't check my phone right now, you know. So putting it into context is a right hemisphere thing. But there was something that you said that I wanted to point out. It'll come back to me. I can't.
I often say things that are very, very profound.
Yes, you too.
Hidden among stuff that is very, very unprofound. So
very mystery of you, very Sherlock Holmes of you.
But it hopefully if it comes back to you, we can definitely touch on that. But I think that we like to, as people, we often go to extremes, right? Where there's going to be some people, you talk to our industry and they're like, I don't have a creative bone in my body. That's why all of my films look the same. Like they're they're well composed, or they're, technically right or whatever. But they're like,
technically right, yeah.
Technically, yes. But I like the business side of things. I like running the business. I like the number. Like there's that side. And we have a lot of people in our industry are that way. And then you go to the complete other end that's like, I love doing this. I love creating. Like, you don't even have to pay me money. To do this thing. I just love to do it, and I love to create. And I like to think, in how you were describing it, about visually telling us something without actually audibly, saying that thing, and how can we piece these things together? And that's something that is so interesting about our industry specifically is, it's like people on this side and on that side. And what you're bringing up with the left brain, right brain stuff is we all need to figure out a way to merge and blend those two things together. I really like, I don't know if you know much about Enneagram and,
What are you?
I think I'm a 3. Like I resonate most with the 3 is where I go. But then whenever I'm around other 3s, it's like, I don't know, maybe not. But the whole thing about that is the whole purpose of the Enneagram isn't necessarily for, I'm a 3 and I'm always a 3 and I'll always be a 3. The idea with it, right, is I'm a 3. This is where I'm strong and this is where I'm weak. But hopefully as you grow older and learn more about yourself and learn more about the world, you're able to, a healthy person is able to kind of not know or understand necessarily what their number is, because they are learning so much, and it's like they're bringing everything together to be a complete person rather than just their specific number, right? Like that's kind of the end goal with knowing something like the Enneagram. And so what I'm bringing that back to your left brain and right brain is, instead of saying, I am just like the business person in marketing, or I am just this, or I am just this, we're like, how can we merge all of this stuff together and go and run our
make the most of
way.
both. Yeah.
Right. And some of that might be, okay, you know what? I can't do everything. I need help. And you bring in help and you kind of figure out how things work, but thinking about things differently, coming at it. And, we like,
do you think it's a cultural thing? Like I recently listened to your interview with Richard Lang as well. And he really described, mainland Europe and the UK more, I would consider more on the I don't know how to describe it. How would you describe it versus the average North American?
In talking to him, he kind of made it sound like European was more darker. That was the thing that I just keep coming back to, is darker, and that doesn't necessarily mean, and that like doesn't necessarily mean, just the color palette. I mean, that has something to do with it, but they're not, don't seem to be as open. Maybe don't seem to be as friendly.
I would almost describe it more so implicit versus explicit.
Okay.
That would be my kind of understanding of things, because I see it here too in Canada. I would consider Canada more so on the American side or than the European side. But I actually mentored under Richard and a few other European filmmakers, and that's where I learned a lot of my. But that's where a lot of my background is from on the technical side of things, and so that's where I'm coming from. And I would describe implicit versus explicit also in tandem with the left brain's analytical side being explicit, being like, oh, I'm looking for that specifically, and let me explicitly grab hold of it, versus implicit right hemisphere tendencies, which are very metaphorical. We learn through metaphor, and which is why the right hemisphere can control both sides, but the left hemisphere can't control both. Only controls the left. So I think when you're I remember what I was going to say earlier.
Great.
You mentioned how you can't how it's when you're in the zone. I think I might not say your words specifically, but when you're in the zone, and you can't like articulate things as well as you might want to. Is that what? Do you remember saying something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was talking about not being very self-aware and not.
Yeah, and that has to do with it too. Not being like not verbalizing and not being able to be as self-aware as you might be on average. And I would say that's a very it's both left and right brained. Left brained is pretty obvious in that it's very specific. You're very in the zone and specific into what you're doing. But the right hemisphere comes into play, and I think is more important here, because when you're feeling things, the emotional side of things, that's a very right hemispheric take on the world, where maybe our listeners here can also attest to this, where you're in the middle of editing something, you're in flow with this edit that you're in, and you can't talk when someone's like, oh, why, like you said, why are you putting the drum beat there, why are you cutting it like this, why does this sound like that? You're in the zone and very in the big picture timeline, versus being left brain, which is specific to that. Let's say, for example, that drum beat. Language is a very left brain thing. The actual words that you articulate are a very left brain action and behavior, whereas the right brain sees things as they are. Left brain is an abstraction of what the right brain sees, which are words. I hope that made sense. But the reason we can't verbalize things in the moment is because we're so in the moment and wrapped up in the big picture of what's going on.
So it's like that's why we have a tough time. Okay, if you're in love, which is a very abstract, big picture thing, and okay, describe it. There's lots of, I think people struggle with articulating an emotion, whether it's love, anger, joy, because it's such it's not a finite thing. It's a very abstract thing. And I feel this thing, and I know that this thing is this emotion, but I can't tell you.
The map is not the territory.
Right. Yeah. I can't tell you what the words are and how I'm feeling with this. I just say, oh, I'm in love. Well, I'm just in love. And that's a really
so interesting.
Yeah, that
and,
is really
and,
interesting.
And thinking about verbalizing things like that, I think maybe when you're thinking or watching a wedding speech, listening to a wedding speech, if they have this long description of what they're feeling for their partner, it could be as long as the dictionary, verbalizing it in many different ways. But I think it's the speeches that don't rely on the words. At least in the film's aspect, when you can see it, when you're there and you can see, and you in your mind what their love looks like, I think those are the best speeches. The best means of conveying a message isn't through words, it's through the image. We learn things through visually. So yeah, that's interesting. Maybe for any couples that are listening, don't stress too hard on your wedding speech. Be more visual in your composure and language. That's what I would suggest.
That's really good.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you, I went to school to be a youth pastor, and so that's what I did. And one of the things one of the classes I had to take was Greek, and it was talk about Bible translations and stuff. And I have a point that I'm making here, but it's like whenever we're taking a Greek word, and this is probably true for any language going from one to another, it was you have the word, and this word means something, but in order to properly convey that meaning, it's like a whole sentence in English, right? And so, and then even then, whenever you have this one word in Greek going to a whole sentence in English, we're still losing some impact going from one to the other. And that's that kind of to me is kind of summing up a little bit of what's, when you're visually watching something and you can see it happening in real life and how they're acting and what they're doing, like that can say so much more. But then whenever we take those feelings, take that emotion and try to put words to it, we often miss the mark. We don't say it correctly. We lose the point. We're, going from Greek to English, we're missing something by trying to put those words on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not asking questions. I'm just kind of processing stuff as you've brought me to a place that's very,
I love it.
It's fun. It's neat. It's good here.
Yeah. I love this stuff. And the same sentiment goes for, I think it was Buddha's quote, "Life is suffering," but the translation was apparently wrong. And he actually said life is something like unsatisfactory, which has a totally different meaning from suffering. Words can only convey so much, whereas action and actually seeing things happen, that's the terrain to what the map was trying to convey.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah. So here, I know we've chatted a lot of kind of heady stuff, a lot of stuff, in here. And maybe if you're listening out there, like, well, what's the way I can apply this in a wedding film? As I'm sitting here thinking about it, like maybe take a step back. Like normally I do an establishing shot and then some group prep getting ready, and it's kind of very, I do what I do, and this is how I make my stuff, and this is what I do. Maybe
very
take
specific.
Maybe take a step back and think of what are they saying when they're not using words. Going back to my youth pastor days and taking a class, there was this monk or somebody in the 500 a long time ago, and his phrase was, "Always preach the gospel, use words when necessary."
What does that mean?
So he basically his point was, you should always be telling the world about your God that you believe in. Always be preaching that. When necessary, use words. So the life that you live, the actions that you do, the things that you are doing is what should be conveying this message. And then whenever it's necessary, use words whenever maybe that falls short. And so that's, I think that kind of can sum up a little bit what we're trying to say here. Maybe your next edit, whenever you're trying, tell this couple's story in a different way, piece it together, and when necessary, use words. I'm probably that's probably like blasphemy, taking that quote and applying it to I don't know. I don't know.
That is so cool though.
But that's a really good thought, man. Aaron, I have really enjoyed talking with you and chatting with you and just thinking on a different level than I think I normally live. So I really appreciate it. If people want to check out your work, if you want to plug your little book that I know that you've written or anything like that, take a second, just kind of talk about where people can find you and anything you want to talk about.
Oh my goodness. Yes. When I met Nick, I met you, Nick, at the Venture Workshop.
Yep,
And
yep.
I was able to hand you one of the books that I wrote. I'm a 2 times. I don't want to toot my own horn here.
You can't toot it.
I was a 2-time Amazon bestseller. I published 2 books for my couples to kind of like help them get ready to be on camera and just kind of get to know each other better. And ultimately that helped me convey their emotions if they're more comfortable on camera, with each other. Yeah. So that was my book. It's in review right now for maybe an updated version. So if you can find it, let me know. I thought I made it unavailable, but if you have it in person physically, just know that it's a rare piece of Aaron Daniel Films. I guess what's the right word? Not paraphernalia, but yeah, it's my book is out there, and if you have it, it's being updated. You can find, if you want to watch my work, you can, I keep it updated on Instagram the most, just at aarondanielfilms.com, or my website at that is my website, aarondanielfilms.com, and Instagram is just at aarondanielfilms. Sorry, I totally messed that up there.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. We've used a lot of brain power today, so
yeah, tell me about it.
You get one flub. Anyway.
I loved speaking about this, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and just kind of sharing us kind of how you tick and what you're thinking about, and it's definitely one of those things that translates over, just kind of.
Many faculties,
like the people that I talk to that are in our industry and are kind of deep thinkers, like you can see that in the films that they do, and so that's really cool. So thank you for taking the time and coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Great conversation, man. I have enjoyed this one a lot. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you over here at How to Film Weddings. Thank you. That's what I want to say. If you need anything at all from us, just head over to our Facebook group and join the conversation, ask us questions, and we would love to connect with you there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, we will see you. Attention wedding filmmakers. The best resource for licensing music for your wedding films is MusicBed. I have been exclusively using MusicBed for about 8 years, and our films are better because of it. I hear a lot from our couples that reach out to us that our wedding films feel different, that the music isn't cheesy. MusicBed has a roster of incredibly talented musicians, bands, and composers who pour their hearts into their work, and you can hear the difference. Find the perfect song with MusicBed's intuitive search features like genre, mood, beats per minute, and my favorite, key. Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed to learn more and take your films to the next level. Use promo code HTFW23 at checkout to receive 1 month free with the purchase of an annual subscription. That's howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed.